As we talked about last week and so many times before, we put a staggering amount of weight on sex. I mean, we write song lyrics about it. Oh, the songs about romantic, the catalogs are big, right? We build themes and movie plots and novels around sex. But if we're being completely honest, and we are, we spend a fair amount of brain power trying to hit some kind of societal benchmark. And look, I'm not here to judge that impulse, but I am going to propose something that might sound a little bit counterintuitive. I don't think that sex is the most important thing in a relationship. I said what I said. Now, before you write me off and hit stop on this audio here, I want to be clear about what I mean. I don't view sex as the ultimate foundation or the singular metric of whether two people belong together. But, of course, there's a but. I do think it acts like an indicator, right? It gives us clues about the underlying health of the relational dynamic. And no, I'm not talking about frequency. I mean, this is not a high school health class. And if you are over 40, I hope that you are not keeping a tally. I'm not even talking about the physical act itself necessarily. But what if the absolute sexiest thing about your relationship right now is that you're barely having sex at all? Hey, lovers. This is Sex in Real Life. Honest conversations about sex and relationships beyond 40. I'm your host, Stacey Herrera. Again, I told you it would sound counterintuitive, but stick with me. We have been conditioned by decades of advice columns and self help books and pop culture to believe that a not so active sex life is a symptom of a dying relationship. We have been taught to view low frequency as an emergency, as a sign that the thrill might be leaving or is completely gone, or that it means that the other person or ourselves that we're pulling away. But the problem with that is that assumes that sex is just a routine check in. Or worse, it assumes that nothing is supposed to ever go wrong. So I just want to dismantle that right now. Relationships are not safe. They are not. They are, by definition, high risk endeavors. To be in a relationship, I mean, to truly let another person inside your interior world is like handing them the the geographic location of your soft spots and every old scar and all your emotional fault lines and hoping that they can handle it with kid gloves, right? I mean, you're exposing the most vulnerable parts of yourself to a person who now has the power to shatter you. That is not safe. That is not safe. It's a total gamble. And historically, we have used sex as one of the ways to mitigate the risk, right? So in the early stages, sex can serve as an insurance policy. We use the frequency to reassure ourselves. We think that physical passion is a way to be like, see, they see me. They still want me. I'm secure. I'm covered, but no. So, what happens when the frequency drops? Does that mean that the relationship collapses? Does that mean it wasn't real in the first place? No. It just means that you have to stop using sex as armor. It means that neither person is using physical intimacy as a bargaining chip to manufacture false security. When you stop hiding behind sex, you are left with seeing things as they are, and also you're choosing to stay exposed anyway, hopefully, maybe. Because we're complicated. Humans are complicated, and our sexuality isn't a light switch that we toggle on and off. It's an ecosystem, of risk and exposure, and there are layers to this shit that have nothing to do with the physicality of sex. There's the emotional part, emotional competence, and there's the eroticism of seeing your partner, step into a room, wearing confidence like a great suit, or seeing their strength, but also knowing how delicate they are in some places. You know, there is the raw tenderness of vulnerability and the way that someone catches your eye across a crowded room during a boring dinner party. I mean, if you go to dinner parties, I'm not really a dinner party person, but maybe you are. But, anyways, it's just acknowledging like that you can share a secret without saying a word by just looking at one another. And there is something profound and unsettling about that. Like, when you feel genuinely heard while you're talking about something that makes you feel inadequate, like that's deep. How you listen to your partner shapes your sexual energy just as much as how you touch them, how you handle conflict when both of you are feeling raw and exposed, and how you give each other room to exist without demanding constant reassurance. That's all part of the sexual currency. It's play and it's tension and it's the willingness to stand in the fire without needing an immediate physical release to prove that everything is okay. If you have a willingness to tolerate the risk, the actual frequency of sex, the physical part of sex, becomes secondary. I mean, you're already engaged in the deepest form of intimacy. The act itself is just one of many languages. It's not the mechanism that keeps the walls from crumbling down. So, back to the original question, or did I even ask this question? I don't know, but maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But back to this question: can your sex life predict whether your relationship will go the distance or fizzle out? Because a lot of us are measuring that, right? So if you are measuring your sex life purely by the numbers, by frequency, by how often you are hitting it, then no, it's not a predictor. Frequency is a terrible crystal ball. Because couples having sex 4 times a week could easily be using it as a distraction to avoid, talking about the things that really are needing to be discussed. So, that would not be a great idea. You can't tell whether or not your relationship will go the distance just because you're fucking all the time. But if you define sex life as your capacity to stay open and playful and exposed, to someone who could hurt you, they could, then yes, it might tell you everything you need to know about the relationship, you know? Because in my personal opinion, relationships rarely fizzle out just because people stop having sex. That's a symptom, yes, but it's usually not the reason. So often it's because they are these thick emotional walls that have been built to protect each other, protect each other from each other, right? Trying to not be hurt, and in the meantime you're like starving the relationship, you're starving the connection. So when the vulnerability vanishes, the sex part, if you're still doing it at all, is also empty. But on the flip side, when you accept the risk of being known, a dry spell isn't necessarily a warning sign. It could just be a season where life is requiring the energy to be put in other directions, because that happens. And while we're talking about relationships going the distance, I think that we should probably look at what that actually implies. In our culture, we have a habit of conflating longevity and success. We look at a couple celebrating their 50th anniversary and automatically hand them a trophy. We think that just because they've survived 5 decades together, that they must have it all figured out and there must be love there. But staying together isn't automatically the same thing as being in an alive relationship. There are so many people who go the distance by, you know, making arrangements, you know, making arrangements and just going through the motions. And that works. If that works for you, no shade. But it doesn't mean that they're necessarily fulfilling experiences. Going the distance, you know, it's only successful if it feels that way. Surviving decades together by, hiding behind emotional armor isn't necessarily a victory, you know? So maybe, I don't know, maybe the goal isn't to build a relationship that guarantees safety or lasts forever at all costs. Maybe we should be thinking about cultivating the courage to stay vulnerable today. Whether the courage shows up as wild, uninhibited sex, that it could look like that. Or it could just be saying, like, hey, I know you could break my heart, and I'm right here anyway. Of course. Of course, uncoupling our egos from the myth of relational safety, that is definitely an episode of another day, and we are not going there today. Not yet. But if this episode gave you pause or invited you into a reflection, share it, tweet it, post it, stack it, text it. And if you enjoy this podcast, I would appreciate it if you took a moment to leave a 5-star rating or a review. It really, really does help other people to find these conversations. Next week, we are doing some serious unpacking. We are going to explore, like, what if they're just not into you right now? Sometimes it isn't that they are just not that into you. Sometimes they're just not into you right now. And we're going to talk about that. Until then, take good care. I'll see you back here next week. Ciao.